So now we get to the tour de food, starting with a pie hole and ending with a poop chute. But in taking this tour, we'll see that digestion involves not only the organs of the digestive tract, but also the circulatory, respiratory, hormonal, and even the nervous systems. We'll be emphasizing these points because really it's not just enough to talk about digestion in isolation from the rest of the integrated organism that we are. The other thing we'll emphasize is the basic array of sub-functionalities that are part of the digestive physiological function. Remember how the larger function of vision could be broken down into sub-functions like image projection? Well, here we're breaking down the big function of acquiring nutrition into four categories, each one being an important component of digestive physiology. Movement. That's the pushing of food down the digestive tube. Secretion, which is the production of enzymes and lubricants like mucus. Digestion, which is actually just the part where the bigger bits of food get broken down into smaller and smaller bits. And then there's absorption, which is the movement of nutrients out of the digestive tract and into the body. The mouth, la boca, la bouche. Here's where you chew, right? And obviously that's a form of mechanical digestion, physically breaking up larger bits into minuscule bits. Not all digestion involves enzymes. In this case, you're using your teeth and tongue to physically mash up your food. You'll also put a good squirt of saliva into the mix, and this is an example of secretion. It contributes water, mucin, which is the mucousy-like glycoprotein that lubricates the food, making it go down easier. And then there's also the digestive enzyme amylase, which you know about well enough from our laboratory. Amylase starts to break down the polysaccharides into disaccharides, and by the time you swallow the food, it's been chopped, mashed, watered, slimed, and partially chemically digested and formed into a loose wad of food called a bolus. The throat or pharynx and esophagus. Now you probably know that from your throat there are two pipes that lead downward into your body cavity. One that goes through the voice box and down the trachea, that's your windpipe, to the lungs, which are part of your respiratory system. And then there's the esophagus, which is going to carry that bolus of food down to your stomach. When you breathe, you obviously need to have that first passage open, the one that goes to the larynx. But when you swallow food or liquids, you want that first passage to be shut, closed, and that other passage to the stomach to be the only way for the bolus to pass. The epiglottis is the little flap that covers the entrance to the larynx and keeps the food moving down in the right direction, that is the esophagus, and not down the air pipe. In this little video clip, the subject is chewing some barium-laced food while she's being x-rayed. You can see the bolus of food forming in the oropharynx and then being pushed down the esophagus when she swallows. Once the bolus is in the esophagus, it's pushed downwards by the smooth muscle of the esophageal walls. In fact, the entirety of the GI tract is equipped with both circular and longitudinal muscle. Circular muscle goes around the tube, while longitudinal muscle goes down its length. And this smooth muscle is what creates the movement, which is the second subfunctionality within digestive physiology. Peristalsis refers to the waves of contraction by the circular muscle. These waves move down the digestive tube, and this is what pushes the food down the digestive tract. I know what you're wondering. Do these muscular contractions close off so completely that a person could drink while standing on his or her head? Well, the answer to that is a definitive yes, at least for this guy. At the bottom end of the esophagus, there's the stomach. And there's a couple of important things to say about this structure. The stomach is an expandable sac that can accommodate a very large amount of food. Animals have to eat when the food is there to be eaten. And if there's a dead zebra to be eaten by a group of lions, the lion with a big expandable stomach will have a substantial fitness advantage over the one who's wearing a lap band. In case you don't know, the lap band is a procedure that puts a kind of tight plastic belt around the stomach so that only a small sector in the upper portion of the stomach is able to store the food. Now there are stretch receptors in the upper part of the stomach that will stretch out even after a small meal like half a sandwich, and these stretch receptors signal the brain, telling it that your stomach is full. and this causes you to lose the desire to eat. This is, I suppose, kind of good if you're a human trying to lose a whole lot of weight, and you should know that there are substantial risks that go along with this procedure. But it's not good at all if you're a lion on the Serengeti who might have to wait a long time between dead zebras. Besides this storage function, the other thing that happens in the stomach is digestion, both mechanical as well as chemical digestion. The stomach walls are very muscular, and its contractions cause its contents to get mushed and sloshed around together with the stomach's secretions, which include both a powerful proteolytic enzyme called pepsin, as well as hydrochloric acid, which keeps the gastric contents extremely acidic at around a pH of 2. This works very nicely to quickly break down the proteins, and it has the added benefit of killing practically any microbe that was there in your food. Okay, then now the question becomes, how do you keep these destructive secretions, both the acid and the enzymes, from dissolving the walls of your stomach? The answer is mucus. Your stomach also secretes a prodigious amount of mucin that protects the lining of the stomach under normal conditions. If something goes wrong with the mucus factory, for example, if you have an infection by the bacterium Helicobacter pylori that interrupts mucin secretion, you could develop peptic ulcers, which are painful lesions in the lining of your stomach where the acid and enzymes have overwhelmed the reduced mucus defenses. By the time the stomach allows its contents, now called chyme, into the small intestine, the food will be pretty well broken down and liquefied and mostly sanitized by that extremely acid environment of the stomach. So far, we've been talking about how food is moved down the digestive tract, but in the case of the stomach, we need to keep the food there until it's ready to pass into the small intestine. And at the lower end of the stomach, which is shaped like a long, curved cone, at the tip of this cone, there's a special muscle known as the pyloric sphincter that's set up to open up a little bit at a time to allow the chyme to sort of trickle into the small intestine. The small intestine itself has three parts: duodenum, jejunum, and ileum in that order, duodenum closest to the stomach and ileum closest to the large intestine. Altogether, it would be about 24 feet in length if stretched out, but instead it's packed into the abdominal cavity together with the large intestine, the stomach, the liver, and a few other organs. We've already been over much of the important anatomy of the small intestine, like villi and microvilli, in the surface area video. In fact, the digestive subfunctionality of absorption is something that we don't even need to talk about here, although we do still need to think about what happens to the food molecules after they're absorbed into the blood from the lumen of the intestine. Three important accessory organs, the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas, sit off to the side of the GI tract. The liver is sort of up at the same level in your body cavity as your stomach, and the gallbladder is attached to the liver. The pancreas sits a little lower, down where the stomach and duodenum meet. A common bile duct carries secretions from the liver and gallbladder downwards in the body cavity, and it joins up with a pancreatic duct that carries secretions from the pancreas. This amounts to a double whammy of pancreatic and bile secretions that empties into the small intestine just downstream of where the pyloric sphincter trickles the stomach contents into the intestine. You might remember from our pH lab that pancreatin, one of the secretions from the pancreas, is basic in pH, and the logic we presented in class at that point was that this secretion contained bicarbonate that neutralizes the acidic chyme from the stomach, thus giving it a mild or relatively intermediate pH for the remainder of its trip through the digestive tube. That's just one function of this secretion. In addition to the pH neutralization, the pancreas also secretes digestive enzymes, including proteases that break down proteins, nucleases that break down nucleic acids, lipases that break down fats, and amylase that breaks down polysaccharides. The liver produces bile, some of which gets stored in the gallbladder, but eventually all of this bile has to be dumped into the intestine. And remember, this happens together with the pancreatic secretions because the two tubes meet just before they flow into the duodenum. Bile is a dark green substance that acts as kind of a detergent, emulsifying, and that means dispersing the fat content of the chyme into microscopic droplets, and this allows the digestive enzymes to do their work. The small intestinal lining itself also secretes digestive enzymes. I would be remiss not to mention that. But what we're going to focus on here is what happens to the nutrients after they're taken into the blood by absorption across that huge surface area of the small intestinal lining. The blood vessels in question here are in the layer of the intestinal wall in between the mucosal layer where the absorption occurs and the muscular layers that cause peristalsis. Blood coming into this layer picks up a heavy load of nutrients from the absorbing surfaces of the intestine, but there's also some bad stuff that gets absorbed as well. And this needs to be cleaned out before the blood can be sent to the rest of the body. So here's where the hepatic portal circuit comes in. The blood, loaded with nutrients as well as some bad stuff, is carried from the small intestine through the hepatic portal vein to the liver, where the molecules of food are processed, and any bad things from your food intake, like alcohol, are largely removed and destroyed. The liver also has the ability to store substantial amounts of glucose in the form of glycogen, which can then be released gradually into the bloodstream during the periods between meals. We'll be coming back to this when we discuss homeostasis of blood sugar in the next video. When the blood flows away from the liver in the hepatic vein, it's carrying a nice load of cleaned up nutrients that can then be delivered to the rest of your body where the nutrients are needed. And oh yeah, by the way, from this point on, through the small and large intestines, the content of the digestive lumen is basically a warm and nutrient-rich soup, ideal conditions for bacterial growth, particularly in the lower portion where fewer enzymes are there to challenge the microbes. And bacteria are a very dominant presence here. You might not initially be happy with the idea of your digestive tract teeming with so many bacteria, all living happily inside your body, but get used to it. These microorganisms are mostly helpful in assisting with nutrient uptake by consuming the things that our enzymes are unable to process, and sometimes turning them into good nutrition for us. Their own little bacterial bodies die and then get digested by our enzymes. By the time stuff passes from the small intestine into the large intestine or colon, most of the nutrients will have been absorbed, and all that's left is water, dissolved ions, undigestible matter like cellulose, mucus, as well as a whole lot of bacterial cells. So what happens in the large intestine? Well, remember that its contents start out as a thin, mucousy, bacteria-laden muck from the exit end of the small intestine, and by the time it reaches the exit end of the large intestine, what you have is a relatively solid substance known in scientific circles as a dookie. So most of the water has been reclaimed by reabsorption across the large intestinal lining. At the same time, we're also reclaiming important ions, like the bicarbonate that we basically had to pour into the intestine as the neutralizing agent for all the acidity of the stomach contents. If we were to lose that bicarbonate without being able to reclaim and recycle it, it could actually have a pretty dramatic effect on body pH. Acidosis, when the pH of the blood drops below the set point of 7.4, is one of the more serious possible consequences associated with bicarbonate loss, and this could happen when you have severe diarrhea. With stuff moving so quickly through the large intestine, there may be no chance to recapture all the bicarbonate, and this results in an overall acidification of the body. Now, I hope you see this as a spot where digestive physiology is relating to homeostasis of blood pH. Well, this brings us quite literally to the end of the digestive tract.